Welcome to Kerbal Industries, Episode 5. Today I'm doing a voiceover as to maximize the goodness of my video quality. So here is past me in the vehicle assembly building, and I'm preparing to get out the R1, which is a very simple low-tech rocket that was designed to maximize the Delta V. What I'm going to do here is equip it with landing legs and science equipment so that I can land it on min-miss and recover it. But before I land it on min-miss, I'm actually going to test its ability by what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to solar orbit. Solar orbit is pretty easy to get to, and there's a large amount of science to be gotten around the sun. So I am just preparing to launch the rocket here. I'm doing all the same things, putting the science equipment on now. Wait, no, not yet. But just checking the Delta V. It has over 7,000 meters per second, meaning that theoretically it could take a Kerbal to Joule and back if launched efficiently. In my next episode, episode, I'm thinking 7 or 8, I'll probably go to Joule. So here I am just assembling the science payload on top of the rocket. Just putting this together. And here we go. We are I'm just currently waiting for me to finish doing all of my things. And here we go. Just ensuring that Jebediah Kerman is aboard the rocket because he is currently my best pilot. I'm going to probably refuse that contract to launch them both into orbit because I kind of don't feel like it, and I don't really enjoy contracts that much because world record things usually give way more money than contracts do. So I am currently just waiting for me to do things. Here we go. And I am launching my rocket. Just ensuring that my audio and my video are synced there. Okay, so here I am on the launch pad, preparing to launch to the sun. I am going to in real time tell you about how to navigate home from the sun when you're having trouble selecting Kerbin or anything around it or on it as a target. So before that, I'm just going to fire up the thrusters and attempt to do a straight up ascent, because to get to the sun you don't really have to time anything in a low Kerbin orbit. All I have to do is blast right up into space, and all I have to do is go straight up at escape velocity, and I'll eventually reach solar orbit. It's actually even more efficient than reaching an orbit, because then you're not using all of this energy in your sideways velocity, because that is kind of it's good for timing and precision, but burning straight up and reaching escape velocity that way will always win for efficiency. So yes, just passing the 5-kilometer mark on our way into the depths of space. Here we go. And we are off, passing the 10-kilometer mark just now, and still increasing in altitude. Here we go. Just accelerating further into the depths of the Kerbal system. 20-kilometer mark, and we're at over almost 800 meters per second, reaching slowly accelerating towards escape velocity, and there go those asparagus-staged boosters. I'm just making a quick save in case I can't get to back to Kerbin from solar orbit, or in case something goes wrong. So, just keeping, and also making a quick save is also good at the start of a YouTube video, because if that YouTube video ends up not uploading correctly or getting deleted somehow, then you can always reload at the beginning of that YouTube video and start it over and try and refilm it. So yes, I am accelerating at high speeds towards the upper atmosphere. I'm actually about to exit the atmosphere now. I'm at 60 kilometers. 70 kilometers is the Kármán line in Kerbal Space Program. So just about there. And we have reached space. All we have to do now is reach around 3,000 meters per second. We're currently at 1,000. And that would be escape velocity, which is the speed at which a craft is traveling fast enough to infinitely overcome a planet's sphere of influence. Like, since in real life, gravity extends infinitely outwards, but there's a speed at which your velocity will always be, your velocity doesn't diminish as quickly as gravity does, and therefore you'll infinitely fly away from that planet for all eternity. However, that isn't the case in Kerbal Space Program, because I'm just entering solar orbit after that. So, just a bit of complicated sciences and maths there for you. And we're around almost halfway to solar, or to escape velocity we're actually more than halfway, I think, at around almost 2,000 meters per second, but I'm currently putting on phys warp mode, because time warp goes really, really fast, but it makes things go by really, really fast. However, you can't use an engine during time warp because of KSP's kind of glitchy calculations. But during phys warp, all it is accelerating physics. So it both multiplies, so during that, it just multiplies the physics engine, multiplies the engine's thrust, and multiplies the engine's fuel consumption, and it also multiplies the velocities and gravities. It just multiplies everything by a certain number, so that it actually appears as if everything's going faster. However, the game, all of the values are just sped up by by that fraction. But I am currently accelerating at I'm almost at escape velocity. 2/3 of the way there around. And I'm currently doing this so that I can get enough money to upgrade the tracking station to the point where I can actually navigate to Minmus, because it's almost necessary to use that to get to Minmus, because Minimus has a very tiny gravity field, meaning that you have to get very, very, very close and precise with it in order to get a successful rendezvous. All I'm doing now is trying to get my conics unpatched. Just me running my science experiment, and while we get home, I run into the problem where I can't select Kerbin as a target. So, and I don't have the point target marker or the target indicator on the nav ball. This means that I have to look at the map and try and figure out where the Earth is, or where Kerbin is relative to my prograde trajectory, and then from there shift that 90 degrees in each different direction in order to point directly at Kerbin. So I'm just using a classical navigation system that only really works if you can see your planet that you want to go to off in the distance. And just hoping that works. Okay. There we go. And I am currently trying to navigate back to Kerbin. And I'm going to use that prograde, retrograde trick where you line up the nav ball in my case, it ends up being around 60 or so degrees away from retrograde, and then I can just point directly for Kerbin and burn. And that would put me back on a trajectory for Kerbin. That's all good. Yeah. So it's working so far. And here we go. Oops, I sped it up. Okay, all the stuff is resynced again. Just ensuring that everything's completely synchronized. There we are, and I am currently attempting to navigate back to Kerbin after I collect the big bucks that the world records places are paying me to do this mission. So, just turning around and trying to point in the direction of Kerbin. Now, when I look in that direction, I know that I can see the big blue and green ball that Kerbin is, and I am just going to point and burn. It isn't the most efficient way to get back, but it's definitely the fastest way back, meaning that I can get my sweet, sweet science as fast as possible, and it doesn't require maneuver nodes, which I have not unlocked yet. So just pointing directly in the direction of Kerbin and firing up my thrusters as hard as I can in order to get a rendezvous with Kerbin again. And I am flying there now. And just slowly accelerating towards the surface of Kerbin. And hopefully getting an encounter. And even if I don't get an encounter, due to my relative velocity with Kerbin, I have plenty of extra delta V. I had around 1,000 meters per second extra, which just ended up drifting into the atmosphere in the form of a fuel tank with an engine on it and burning up. Very depressing. Anyway, I am currently entering the Kerbin sphere of influence and trying to adjust my trajectory as to enter Kerbin's atmosphere and aerobrake using my heat shields. Here I am, just speeding towards the surface of Kerbin and getting everything ready. Okay. This is going relatively well for me, and I am just cruising for the planet. Just a lot of me maneuvering around. Make sure everybody, make sure to subscribe, and if I am, and like, it helps out the channel a lot, and if I'm lucky, I may even be able to get a Discord up for people to vote on next missions, as well as I'm going to do, when I get 100 subscribers, a 100 subscriber challenge. And go to Kerbal Industries episode 1 and comment there where and what you want me to do for my as the 100 subscriber challenge. I'm currently only at 10s, but when I get there, yes. So just me collecting all of my monies that I get for all of these world records. Still, in my opinion, you can get a lot more fun to do world records because you get to fly somewhere new and get to do something challenging, and you actually get a lot more money than ferrying just after tourists into orbit. Just preparing to enter the atmosphere. Well, on the thing of money and collecting of that, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get money is rescue missions. Because in my opinion, rescue missions are the best because you don't just get a lot of money, you also get a free Kerbinot, and usually hiring someone when you're late in the game costs a lot. So rescuing someone out of Kerbin orbit both gives you a 1-star Kerbinot because any Kerbal that's been in orbit instantly gets 1 star, which is probably something unintended that they had in that they didn't think of, because any Kerbinot that you rescue out of orbit automatically is a 1-star person, and as well you get paid for them. So you both get money and astronauts. It's perfect. And experience points. It's amazing. Well, just doing everything here. And all items stored all my science items have been stored, and I am speeding for the surface of Kerbin, preparing to enter the atmosphere. This does have plenty of heat shielding and all of the other things. However, because I accidentally entered the atmosphere while my stage was still attached, I am going temporarily reducing increasing the heat tolerance of parts in the settings section, just so that I can eject this thing, and then I promise I am going to turn the heat tolerance back on. I just didn't feel like refilming this entire 15-minute mission because a stage blew up and it sent me spinning off into nowhere. So yes. It's kind of like on par with Matt Lown going into cheats and turning on infinite electricity when his flipping rover didn't have enough electricity to use the robotic arm. However, in my opinion, this isn't as bad because that was actually a cheat that disabled your ability to that disables the ability to earn achievements and stuff. This is a bit more a precaution, I'd say. Because if you were to I consider that more of a cheat, especially if it was during an ion engine mission, if you turned that infinite electricity on. Because then you could just have a zillion ion engines and all you would have to worry about was xenon. But off that topic, I'm entering the atmosphere, and I think plenty of amateur Kerbals observing the stars with their telescopes may accidentally see a comet or an asteroid, and then have to confirm with them that was actually one of our spacecraft. Now, what I'm doing here, where I jettison the heat shield and then I pull like a massive amount of deceleration G's, is because of Kerbal Space Program's really, really, really weird physics. There's the open nodes, like open attachment nodes, pull a lot of drag. So the heat shield is one open attachment node, and when I detach it, that becomes a separate craft pushing up on it, as well as the open attachment node on the bottom of the capsule, meaning that it effectively doubles or triples the drag, causing the craft to decelerate from several hundred meters per second to subsonic in less than a second. Speaking of G-forces, I recently learned about the Dyson and how he wrote the paper on gravitational machines and how two neutron stars orbiting each other, one solar mass each, could slingshot a spacecraft up to a quarter of light speed in less than a second, and if you entered it at a quarter of light speed, you could accelerate it to half light speed, because gravity assists kind of ignore the whole exponential increase in required power for acceleration, because they put in a certain amount of acceleration, not a certain amount of power or energy. So that's pretty interesting. But most people said or say about that 10,000 G's would flatten any human being. But really, since it's all gravity, every single atom in your body and in your spacecraft would be accelerating at the same speed, meaning that there aren't any deadly flattening G-forces to crush you against the wall of your spacecraft. The only thing that would be affecting you would be tidal stress, which a large enough spacecraft, even with modern materials, around 80 meters, would be able to survive that tidal stress. So I've just recovered the capsule, and that's 206 science. And I've actually decided not to spend that science because it's more satisfying to collect massive amounts of science. So that science plus my Minmus mission science. So I'm going to go on my Minmus mission next, and I am just going into the I'm just going to open the tracking station and upgrade it so that I can navigate, and I'm going to purchase some other things around the Space Center, such as the astronaut complex, and here my thing is currently at 50 G's, and I was thinking at that point, everybody's currently nervous about 5G and the radiation, and I'm like, and I think that's all rubbish, but currently I'm like, if people are nervous about 5G, they should look at that thing, because that's 50G. Well, here we are going back into the vehicle assembly building to assemble a rocket to go to Minmus. Yes, here is the Lear 1 and the R1. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just going to strap some simple I think I'm going to put on an extra pair of boosters, of Aerosparagus Sage boosters, just to give it a tiny bit of extra delta V, as well as putting landing legs on the upper stage so that I can just land, which is quite obvious. You need landing legs to land, but however, you could land on your engine. However, that's highly dangerous because engines, while are very fragile, they're made out of the heat and pressure resistant tiles are heat and pressure resistant, but not very impact resistant, and they will shatter. Unlike in Kerbal Space Program, in real life, engines will break when you tap them. So just be making sure to check my staging, as Scott Manley always says, and preparing to go off. Here is the Lear 1 being all strapped together and prepared for launch, and I'm just attaching some small fins to it, because if you don't know, a weird thing about the small landing legs is that if you put them on, they don't extend sufficiently below the Terrier engine. So everybody puts them on fins so that the fins give them a little extra bit of height, give the rocket a little extra bit of height, so that the Terrier engine doesn't break on landing and the landing gear dampen all of the impact. Just waiting a second for the craft just observing the craft, making sure to check it all over. And I'm just making sure to activate auto strut, because it is kind of cheaty, I know, reprogramming the way that the game thinks things are attached. However, because of how the struts work, they really increase part count and lag. Because one strut counts as 2 parts, and they're incredibly laggy. So, auto strut is what all the pros use, so that you don't have a zillion metal bars everywhere. The only real reason why I use struts is if I'm trying to make like one of those, like when you have like a little cage. They have one, but that's a decoupler now. But when you want to make a larger one, like you make a little cage of up and down struts around something, and you can put like little fuel tanks and parts in there. And it's just a overall good decorative feature on a rocket when you're trying to get it to look nice. So, yes. Well, we're here. I just want to talk about some things. Next mission I'm going to finish the Minmus mission, or that I'm going to pull off here. I'm going to land this time, and I'm going to go home. Then I'm going to fly out to Duna, and then in episode 7 and episode 8, I'm going to land and come back home. In episode 9, I want to assemble a fully functioning craft that can go to either Val, Bop, or Lathe, and collect science from there. After that, I'll probably try and tackle some other things places that I haven't been to that are commonly underrated, like Elu, Drace, Ike, and Gilly, as well as a little trip off to Moho, possibly. And then probably start trying to get inspiration for ridiculously large and complicated missions, like the ridiculous missions that other YouTubers try and pull off. Also, when I unlock all of the other a lot of the other parts and stuff, I would like to assemble an SSTO. I've recently got a bit better at assembling them. And this one I am going to send to, I want to send an SSTO to Joule, because it's kind of challenging. It's nice, and I've been practicing trying to get maximum delta V into an SSTO. It's kind of a bit more about minimizing the ratio of dry mass to wet mass of the craft, and trying to reduce the amounts of dead weight. Like Kerbal in a storage bay doesn't weigh as much as a fully functioning capsule does, and things like that. Just trying to minimize the weight. However, then I also want to figure out how to build some big I'm good at making tiny SSTOs. I'm rather skilled in that. However, big cargo SSTOs are rather difficult for me, including large cargo rockets. I have a bit of trouble while trying to scale things up because I know I could take my rocket that takes 10 tons into orbit and bolt on more identical rockets, and then it might be able to take 100 tons into orbit. However, that looks absolutely horrible. So I have to figure out how. So basically, what I would want to do is, instead of having one large fuel tank, I could have one extra large fuel tank, and instead of one mainsail, I could have 3 mainsails, or something, and things like that. And I've been trying to figure out how to build larger rockets with similar functionalities. So that is also a major thing that I'm trying to do. I don't think this really needs very much explanation, but this is just your basic ascent profile. I'm about to discard my first pair of boosters right here. They're about to burn out, and 3, 2, 1, they're burnt out. Why am I not discarding them? Oh, I just killed my throttle so that I could discard them, but there they are. I'm just flying I've just got a severe case of tipping rocket syndrome here, and it looks as if it may be cured now. I'm currently attempting to reach orbit, then I will be able to do a simple transfer burn for Minmus, and then do all of the other activities of landing on Minmus, such as all of the science collection. Something funny that I do that not very many people do is I go to Duna before I go to the moon. It's kind of like a Werner von Braun style, because in his opinion, all the probes that we landed on the moon were good enough, and that the real destination that people should be going to was Mars. So, yes. And yeah, so I'm going to Duna before I actually go to the moon. And I'm landing on the ancient comet that's harder to fly to before I go to the moon as well. The video's around halfway through, and I am almost in orbit. No, I'm currently just waiting for the craft to reach orbit. Also, I'm just waiting for the craft to reach orbit, yeah. Yeah. Also, something that I just have to point out is that if you build an SSTO in Kerbal Space Program and it looks really small and cheap, and you question why it doesn't exist in real life, as long as it doesn't have aerodynamic trickery in it, here's the reason why it doesn't. If you look at a chart, Kerbin is 10 times smaller than the Earth. Has the same gravity, but it's same mass, but it's 10 times smaller. So, yeah, because the Earth is 6,000 kilometers in radius, and Kerbin in diameter, and Kerbin is 600. So, that's why it's so much easier to get into Kerbin orbit. So, if you're able to make an SSTO with no aerodynamic trickery that can get into orbit around Jool, because Jool is more similar to Earth than Kerbin, then you can get into orbit around Earth. Or try and go into like the real solar system mod and launch into orbit. Getting into orbit around the Earth is a lot harder than getting into orbit around Kerbin. Kerbin is smaller than the Earth's moon. Oh, just setting targets for Minmus and plotting a maneuver node to get there at around a 45-degree angle. 45 degrees in Kerbal Space Program, increments of 45 degrees usually work well. 45 degrees to Minmus, 45 degrees to Duna, 90 degrees to Jool. It usually works pretty well. Yes. Just setting up a correction burn for the plane change, because plane changes at the in between the apoapsis and periapsis are actually, when you have an elliptical orbit, are actually more efficient than plane changes at the periapsis. Because at the periapsis, you actually have to move that much, or the angle that you want to move downwards, to actually change it on the other end of your orbit. And when you're working in the middle, you have a tiny bit more leverage, meaning that you don't have to go as far to change your trajectory. Okay. Just waiting for my node to come up, and my burn time is roughly a minute. So I want to start the burn, or a minute or so. So I actually want to start the burn at around 30 to 45 seconds. I want to split half the burn before the node and half the burn after the node, because doing that actually increases the efficiency of an orbital burn. It's an incredibly strange thing, but it works that way, and it's very mysterious. And so yes, the burn is on, just slowly draining away, or I'm going to use the remainder of the fuel in the first stage to finish to do part of the insertion, and then use a bit of the fuel in the landing stage to to finish the insertion, or the ejection. Yes, I'm mixing up all of my terms. I'm currently finishing the ejection, and I am going to then wait for around 2 days of Kerbal time for the next maneuver node to line up. 2 Kerbal days is around half a Earth day, and so yes. I think someone was able to get a Kerbal to Duna using a ridiculous amount of ion engines, vectors, and a humongous rocket to Duna in under 9 Kerbal days, which when you divide that by 4, it actually ends up being 2.25 real-world days. And they were doing it for a no-time warp challenge, so they had to do was leave their computer running for 2.24 days, and then they would come back and see Duna and land there. And yeah, it's very crazy that someone actually did that, and the rocket required more than 20 kilometers per second in Delta V. It was absolutely ridiculous. And humongous. Yes. Whew. I feel like after this, I might actually do all the rest of my videos voiceovers, because this is actually going a bit better than just recording my voice, or just while I'm playing. So right now I'm just adjusting my trajectory to point trying to find the maneuver node, and it only requires 37 meters per second. I have plenty of Delta V, and I am going to return, and plenty of Delta V to land, and plenty of Delta V to return to Kerbin. So I am currently just approaching I'm just trying to get my trying to get my velocity nice and even out. Because of how precise this node has to be, I want to get it within 0.0, or actually 0.4 is good enough. 40 centimeters per second can actually make a very big difference in terms of planetary motion. Even moving 40 centimeters per second can get you millions of miles off course. So basically, if you were flying to Mars and you accidentally threw a wrench out the window with too much force, you could maybe even have an incorrect trajectory by the time you get there. It's incredibly crazy. I'm not the person to really talk about how maneuvers work and why they have more efficiency in different places, but actually go watch another video of someone who's a bit more professional than me. I understand the orbital motion, I just don't know exactly why. I can only explain so much about it. That's what I'm trying to say. So yes, there it is, the big blue ball of mint ice cream that all of the Kerbals are always trying to taste. Minimus. Whatever you're supposed to call it, there it is. So I'll have to show off a feature of that is good when you turn on advanced tweakables, where you can remove things from symmetry, meaning that I could change the spring strength and extension rate of every landing gear individually, which will help a lot to stop the rocket from tipping over when I land it on a very, very steep slope. I will just increase the spring strength of the landing gear in the direction of the slope and decrease the landing gear in the opposite direction. Currently, what I'm trying to pull off is an incredibly efficient landing where you come with less than a kilometer of the ground, but still in orbit, and then you just fire your thrusters with all the power you've got and deorbit yourself while only a few meters above the ground. It's incredibly efficient, and it means that the only velocity that you really have at that time is your sideways velocity. It's much more efficient than killing your velocity and slowly working your way down. So what I'm doing is just deorbiting and then working my way down only around 1 kilometer, which is a lot easier than deorbiting and slowly trying to fly down over 100 kilometers, which takes much longer and uses much more fuel. It would have been more efficient if I could have got my trajectory a bit lower to the ground, because I was still around, when I had 0 meters per second, I was still around 1,500 meters above the ground. In the future, I will want, in other missions to other planets, I'll want to bring that, my periaps down to less than 500 meters when I stop, so I don't have to do that much working down to the surface to do, which is where all the fuel is really wasted. Just slowly descending down to the ground. Very much suspenseful, even though this already happened for me. And after I'm going to land, and I'm going to have to play around with the spring strength a bit and other things like that. Like the spring strength of the landing legs, because I'm gonna land on a big slope. The science that I'm going to bring back is going to be the equipment on there, surface samples, EVA reports, and even a bit of green sandstone that I've located laying on the mountains. I would kind of like it if they made rare surface features that you could find and your Kerbal could pick up that are worth more than normal. But usually every planet has a few surface features, one type of surface feature that a Kerbal can actually pick up, and it's always worth the same unless you've gotten it before, then it's not worth as much. I am just slowly descending downwards, and here the craft is touching the ground. There's going to be around 5 or so minutes of me just playing with the spring strengths. So I'm probably just gonna wait through that one. And yes, I'll just have to increase the spring strengths on the side landing gear, the left landing gear, and decrease it on the right landing gear, and that will fully make sure that my rocket will not tip over. Always make sure to remind me in the comments if I forget to turn on SAS before I take off, because when I leave and get back in, SAS defaults to off. So always remind me to turn on my SAS before I launch, because it's very problematic when you're launching off a planet like Duna And the first thing that happens is your craft instantly tips off to the side, and you have to do a bit of aerial stunts to get it to flip back over again. Yes, just currently playing around with the stress limits and the stuff on the with the stress limits and the spring strength on the landing legs to get the craft to even out on the ground. It's currently just tipping over like crazy. However, even in Minimus's very, very, very low gravity, the reaction wheels in the capsule are good enough to overcome it. The moon is a bit more, is probably going to work a bit better. It's actually going to be pretty terrible. Because, I would probably need a bit flatter of a rocket because I don't want it to tip over. Also, putting your rocket, even a tall rocket, as long as it has a nice big base and has some system to ensure that it comes in pointing roughly down on a relatively flat surface, like a planet's ocean, would probably be good. That's why I kind of like lathe, because you can land on the oceans and they're nice and flat. As long as you have it's nice and buoyant, you won't tip over. When I do a lathe mission, something that I want to do is I want to make sure that the transfer stage will have 4 drop tanks. However, they're all going to be snapped together with one like central cross beam. And the point of that is that I can deorbit it with my rocket on top of it and use that as a flotation device. I'll probably just have a small rocket, just barely capable of returning a Kerbal to orbit, and a little cute-looking dinghy with a little jet propeller on the back, so that I can maybe boat over to an island and get some surface science. And get some science from like another biome. So that will be pretty cool, bringing a rocket and a boat to Lathe in a future episode. But before that, I have Duna to worry about. I want to, I might actually build a base on Duna and like a little landing pad. Because, and also try and get some calculator that can calculate, like, the best way to land on Duna. However, it is very inefficient to just kill all of your velocity and drop down directly. But something that I could do is I could put my craft, or make sure that that the periapse is on the opposite side of the surface side of the planet with the base, and my apoapse goes really high up. All I would have to do is calculate around how far Duna would rotate, kill all my velocity at my apoapsis, and then use that gravity to pull me back down to Duna and successfully land back on the surface. Back on topic again, I am just flying. I've finally finished all of my spring problems, and Jeb is currently flying over to this incredibly large rock made out of green sandstone. Sadly, this is a bit large for Jeb to sample, but he can plant a flag by it, and that is what I am going to do. So no sample of the gigantic green rock there, but I can put a flag here, and I can maybe come back in the future with a gigantic rover with one of those cool robotic arms from Breaking Ground on it. I also want to unlock the Breaking Ground surface bases as early as possible, because those are absolutely amazing. They actually look like you came to a planet and are building like a little outpost there for research. Unlike before, like where if people wanted to make like a little tiny research outpost, all of the science experiments strapped to a structural plate with little landing legs on it. No. Now we actually have a fully functioning, deployable science lab that can be deployed on the surface, and it looks especially good when you also bring out when you drop on the surface an inflatable airlock with or two inflatable airlocks like fastened together and two little landing legs on it. It's something that I like to in my other world that I do always bring. You can have it, but it looks like a tiny deployable hab that you would actually like see on a base on another planet. It's always something cool that it looks like. And something that I actually like is when I build like a little quick base on a planet, I don't want to have the whole outpost look. I want to have this little strapped together and inflatable strapped together base that looks like it was just thrown together to be used temporarily. It just gives off like the interplanetary expedition kind of vibe, and I kind of like that. Same thing with those metal tripods with the lights on the tops of them, which I'm really excited for when they come out finally for console edition. Well, I finally found, after a lot of flying around and jetpacking, a piece of green sandstone, which I want to bring back to the craft for returning to Kerbin for analysis. Because that thing is incredibly expensive. It is worth over 150 science. So yes, it's very much worth bringing it back. And the one thing that I'm questioning is, this thing is worth more than the Science Junior. So it's actually a bit more worth it to bring a Kerbal than to bring a probe and a Science Junior that can return. And yeah, I think that's kind of crazy that just a rock off the surface that only a Kerbal can get is worth more science than the entire miniature science lab that you can bring to the surface. Also, something that I want to be added to deployable science that I think is kind of necessary is maybe like a tiny would be a Science Junior module. They have an experiment. They have a version of everything. However, they don't have like a deployable version of the Science Junior. I'm just hoping that I see that in the future. But here's Jebediah just returning to his rocket and just preparing to jump back in the rocket and fly home next episode. So hope everyone is doing well and everything is good. Just preparing to take back off before this mission ends. See ya next.